Hello, fellow toolboxers, and welcome to episode number 288. This is a really special episode, especially for those doing or interested in learning about national interest waivers. It's a pivotal, maybe a short lasting special opportunity to be able to file these cases and get them approved based on less documentation because an updated internal policy of the administration. Again, it's a must listen to and share with your colleagues. Our guest interview with Jonathan Grode of Green and Spiegel partner there is really special and nice of him to share this information publicly, but it'll be a real game changer in practice. So get on top and listen to it, and I appreciate you tuning in to that. Before we get started, I want to remind you and ask you if you do like it, or maybe beforehand, leave a nice review wherever you're watching this, 5 stars. It really helps the program get out more and get more people interested. I also want to thank our main sponsor for this episode, which is DocAwise. It's the all-in-one form and management service that you've all been using and you can continue using. It's going to be a really helpful thing as you get more of these cases, especially NIWs and these marriage cases and all other types of cases, managing operations and everything. DocAwise and system has been around and one of the top performing softwares out there in the immigration space. Side note, I want to also thank the Toolbox itself and the special course we have called Champions for Freedom, which is a marriage green card course describing and breaking down bit by bit how to prepare the application to submit it to USCIS for success, and go into the nuances of preparation and admissibility, consular processing, affidavit support, adjustment status, how the contract looks, how to talk with the client, a whole batch, and it's really helpful. All you got to do is email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. That's info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. If you're interested in getting involved in that program, at this time you have to be an immigration lawyer to be a part of it. And the great thing is we have a community afterwards, so we have monthly office hours to review stuff and ask questions, and there's a team there of other people like yourself that we can learn from. So it's a long-term course that's deep into developing your practice and expertise in what we do. Now, everything we're talking about is not intended for individual legal advice. Consult with an attorney before taking any measures or steps in your case. But with that, let's get the show started. John, thank you for coming on the show again. Good to see you again, brother.
It's always a pleasure, John.
Thanks. It's like we hit the 6-month mark of almost 6 months of when we last talked. And so one is you have this really creative way you've discovered about the NIW process and national interest waiver, which you're very kind enough to share publicly about how they're processing these cases. So I want to get into that first, and then kind of do a follow-up on what's been going on in your operations. I mean, you got a big operation. I think 80 plus people working in the U.S., like a part of your team. I mean, immigration firms are small, so you're considered one of the biggest at this point with that amount of staff. And so how does managing like a large vessel like that work? And like, how's the last 6 months been, the things you've seen? But let's start with the NIW stuff. What's that you learned?
So NIW is kind of an interesting thing. Like, I can't tell you how many, I'm sure all of us have experienced a pilot contacting us saying that they're ready for an NIW. That's not the NIW that we're talking about. I've yet to find a pilot to win an NIW, although I know that there's some heavy advertising, particularly in Latin America, going on surrounding NIWs.
Mm-hmm.
This was more actually something that I picked up on in a memoranda that came out from the White House in January of 22. And ostensibly, it was like talking about emerging technologies, NIWs, entrepreneurship. And in there, it talked about emerging technologies and a specific, list of occupations that are, or fields that are really critical to the ability of the United States to move forward as a leader within technological development. And secondarily, there was a little line in there that talked about advanced degrees in STEM fields, and particularly a PhD being very strong evidence, compelling evidence that the person meets each of the 3 prongs of the NIW standard under domicile. So I looked at this thing and I said, it seems to me like, hey, on some level, they're really trying to push green cards here, like really trying to push green cards, especially in these fields. But, John, it's tough to get people to take a chance. It's tough to get people to say, hey, listen, let's give this a go, especially when you're coming off of a J1 or you have other status where, filing for an immigrant visa can be problematic. So, fortunately, having a little bit of a bigger firm and having the financial ability to do it, I actually put out like a call looking for volunteers. Yeah. And I kind of refer to it almost as like my own clinical trial, where I found a few people who I said is like, I'll do the legal work for you. You have to pay the filing fees, but I want to submit a national interest waiver on your behalf if I think you meet the criteria that the White House is looking for. And I was fortunate enough to get a handful of people who had PhDs dealing with cancer research
Mhm.
who are willing to give it a go. Now, John, when I put this thing together, it was like mega bare bones. Normally we're used to submitting NIWs that are like
Yeah.
this. I popped this thing in, and it was ostensibly a cover letter, a little bit of a legal argument, and a copy of the PhD, and that was it. Like that was it. Like I'm talking like I wrote like 3, 4 pages instead
Yeah.
of like a tomb, and the evidence was very thin. Remarkably, the cases started coming back approved. And it wasn't really an actionable item. Look, there's no panacea to immigration. I think we all have to be aware of the fact that there's no cure all. It's not like we're solving everything, every single problem here, but it's a nice little tool to have in the quiver. And then in January, when USCIS came out with premium processing for NIWs, it really became an actionable, active part of the practice and something that we're doing regularly. I wrote an article about it that hopefully is going to get published in Benders. I'm not sure who still subscribes to Benders these days, but
Well, that's why you got a Toolbox magazine as a place to be. I wish you got into the last issue. We just published.
well, we can put it in the next one. I mean, we have rights to republish. I know NAFSA is looking at it, but essentially, like, it's just another way of solving a problem. The cool thing about this is it's a very low cost option.
Yeah.
NIWs, EB1As, because of the time involved, have become very protracted, elongated processes. A lot of research, a lot of time developed. Here we're able to do something pretty quickly, inexpensively, and it's having, great results.
Wonderful.
In fact, we got a request for evidence using this like template, our first request for evidence 2 weeks ago. And I wrote back to the service rather than responding to the RFE. I said, hey, a little matter of quality control. I'd like you to relook at this before we answer the RFE because of X, Y, and Z. And they actually reopened the case and are re-adjudicating it.
Did
So
you do pre processing? You emailed the pre processing unit?
yeah, I just emailed the premium processing unit. And I do that quite often actually if I think it's a case where they made a
Yeah.
mistake and I don't want to answer RFE.
It's one of the benefits of pre processing for those who don't use it. Like a lot of times you have someone you could talk to and could be rational and work with you on things that just
I
fix
think the
stuff.
$2,500 version is worse than the old version, the cheaper version. But I mean, it is really the only mechanism we have whereby we can actually talk to somebody.
Yeah.
They'll answer the emails. They'll take them seriously. So yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's been actually a real great advancement. It's been one of the cooler things I've done and tried. And here's the cool thing about it, John. So I started talking to a few people about this idea and this thing, and through some contacts, I was actually able to get connected to Amy Nice, who used to work at the White House and actually wrote that 2022 policy memoranda. And we got to chat about it at length. And like I got sort of like the inside scoop of what the government was thinking, what her mission was, what she was charged to do. And it really kind of was a validating exercise to the point where Amy's become a friend and she's doing some amazing stuff at Cornell. And I really like what she's doing in terms of pushing immigration policy to advance the concept of getting the best and the brightest here to help develop these emerging technologies. But just rapping with her and being like, this is what I thought you meant, this is what I meant, and her talking
Yeah.
about like how they could frame it and what they could say and couldn't say. Um, it was an extremely rewarding experience.
What's a game changer? You heard it here first. Immigration Toolbox. Wonderful information from John Grode. It's a game changer, and honestly, it brings the price down a lot too if it's like that, because some of these cases could be really pricey, and you're kind of throwing a gamble on there. But if it's a gamble, but if it decreases the amount of time, the headache of like these when you get these crazy, just the preparation of these cases, the RFEs and stuff. But if there's some rational memo that kind of outlines and helps the officer
Yeah.
adjudicate what their basic case, and that's wonderful.
And like, here's the thing we got to remember. This administration, it's a policy memoranda. It's not written in stone. It's not a regulation.
Yeah.
Might not be here forever. Um, and secondarily, from a functionality perspective, EB2 itself is a little bit problematic these days because of the retrogression. So it's not gonna like
Yeah.
necessarily work for your J1s who are like trying to get to employment authorization and that kind of thing. So yeah, be a little choosy, but it's another tool in the immigration lawyer's toolbox there.
Thanks.
So they'll take off of your tolerance, my friend.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Now, speaking of one's toolbox, how's yours going? You have this firm that's operating, a lot of lawyers, constantly growing, and just a lot of volume too. You're doing great work. What has the first, we're entering June 1st. What has the first 5 months, around 2 quarters of the year been for you? What changes have you seen? What no change have you seen?
It's a great question. 2022 was a year of organic growth like I've never seen before. And when I refer to organic growth, John, I'm talking about the clients that we already have just having a greater immigration need.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, like a lot of our business as business immigration attorneys is like heavily influenced by macroeconomic principles.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's like if people are hiring and there's a lot of churn in the labor market, certain amount of those people are going to be foreign nationals, certain amount of them are going to be transfers, certain amount of them you're going to do as your practice. So like the organic growth rate that we had in 22, the great resignation, the great hiring, people fighting for employees, it was like nothing I've ever seen before. I mean, it was white knuckle, full on, get as much out of the staff as you possibly can kind of year. And financially, from a firm perspective, we had our largest growth ever. We were 50% up over 21 in
Wow.
terms of revenue, which is just incredible. This year, the volume is sustaining, but we're not seeing that organic growth like we used to. There's a lot of, as we all know, tech sector cutbacks that's reverberating through other industries. The banking industry is currently experiencing some pullbacks. I know that there's a lot of layoffs scheduled for July, August, September. The reality of overhiring, the effects of higher interest rates, the tech pullback, how that affects secondary and tertiary markets. It's had a negative impact on immigration practices as we deal with rising staff costs, rising costs of operations, and other inflation metrics. So, we're getting squeezed a little bit on the profitability of the enterprise, if I'm being 100% honest with you.
Yeah.
The saving grace of all of this is the fact that we constantly, as you point out, are adding new clients and we're winning RFPs and we're, making some headway in that respect. So it's it's been a fine year so far, but certainly not like what we saw the past few years. And I think honestly, this sort of stasis that we're in is something that will probably continue for another 12 to 18 months is my best guess. The other thing is, and this is the reality of the situation, I think a lot of employers are losing faith in the immigration system. And, this H-1B lottery was a real kick in the teeth. I mean, when you have this level of applications, I mean, what are we talking? Nearly 800,000,
Mm-hmm.
and more than half of them were not unique. Where we have like these many holes in the lottery system, where you have such low selection rates for employers that have become very reliant on the H-1B. Boy, man, that was a tough pill to swallow this year. And I think you see a lot of employers saying, I'm just not going to engage in this anymore. I think
Yeah.
you're seeing multinational employers looking at global mobility training programs so that they can send people overseas and have them train
Yeah.
up in a managerial role to bring them back as intercompany transferees. I think people are saying, you know what, we're not even going to deal with the H-1B lottery. Why even bother? And I think, this is where we see a mistake in policy. And I am no politician by any stretch of the imagination. While I applaud the administration for things like what we're talking about with the NIW and the advancement and access of permanent residency for STEM fields, it seems counterintuitive to me to place a heavier emphasis on the immigrant visa process over the non-immigrant visa process. On a fundamental level, being here temporary and having the ability to work temporarily in the United States should be easier and more accessible than an immigrant visa process where somebody's going to remain permanently. And I don't think we're looking at that. The government makes an announcement that they think there was fraud and bad behavior in the H-1B process. You can't make a statement out that without saying where the investigation is going and what's going on. If we have students that are choosing the United States for their education, they're here for an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and not knowing that they're going to be able to remain after graduation, even with 3 tries with a STEM OPT, is highly problematic. The rest of the world, if you look at global trends, especially in Western Europe, where they're recognizing, again, these macroeconomic perspectives, but this time with like birth and death rates and how we're losing workers, and you're seeing European countries and Australia and embracing immigration like they haven't before. You're starting to see a lot of these policies come through from low-skilled workers up to high-skilled workers, and we're still stuck in the mud debating whether or not the H-1B quota should be moved, or if people should actually be subject to the H-1B quota if they're graduating with STEM degrees, is disappointing. You know, we are dealing with a number of trends in terms of nearshoring, where companies are setting up operations in Canada to take advantage of the same time zone behavior and an easier immigration process. We're losing workers, we're losing revenue, and ultimately someday we're going to lose innovation. And this is where, like, I would say, you know, I'm complimentary of this administration for rolling back a number of the Trump immigration policies that I found highly problematic. In the same respect, John, I mean, we are not advancing the ball.
Mhm.
And merely getting us back to status quo, I don't think it's good enough. I don't think it's good enough. So, I mean, look, 2023, it's been okay. It's been okay. But I do think there's a number of larger scale trends that we need to keep a really close eye on. And then the final thing, and I will say this with a dollop of uncertainty, but also excitement, is, you know, the machine learning. I refuse to call it AI because I don't really think it's artificial intelligence, but this machine learning revolution that we're currently experiencing will be a tremendous game changer for our industry. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people who see it as a threat to the legal practice. I agree, it is a threat on some level, but it's a tremendous opportunity for us to become more efficient. There's ways to incorporate AI into the operations of your paralegals and your staffs. There's ways to do it legitimately. I think we have to proceed cautiously. I think there's a lot of questions around attorney-client privilege that the Bar Association hasn't really been able to address adequately because of the newness of the technology. I think we have to be mindful of putting information of clients into these programs because they're not housed on our servers.
Mhm.
But certainly, like, to dismiss it or be afraid of it rather than embrace the change that is coming is a mistake. We have to recognize that this might be a tool to make us more efficient and more effective. And we're going to have to see how these applications come out into the legal industry.
Yeah,
But to say that it's like it's going to disappear or it's just a gimmick, this one feels really sticky. You know,
yeah.
when it came to the
NFTs.
metaverse and
Yeah.
alternative reality, I was highly skeptical. But having played around with programs like ChatGPT and seeing some of these AI image generators and what they can do, there's a lot there.
It's the real
There's a
deal. Yeah.
lot there. So,
Yeah. As soon as I got on it, I used it a little bit. I'm like, oh my God, this is probably bigger than even the internet is. Like as big as that was. This is
I mean,
great.
you know, I teach at the law school, and every year I get students who like ask me for letters of recommendation. I'm going to tell a little secret here for your listeners, but I did all my letters of recommendation this year on ChatGPT. It saved me tons of time,
And
tons of time.
it's a little better. I mean, like it's my best writing. It makes it even better. I'm like, oh man, like that's such a nicer way to say things and like phrase it, this and that. It's really good.
Yeah, like I had to do a Chamber of Commerce event at the port, and like I don't do a lot of customs work, so I asked ChatGPT to ask me like 20 questions for customs agent, and like it didn't do the job for me, but it saved me a lot of time, and I was able to like build off of it. And I think that's the idea. It can give you a great
Yeah.
foundation for doing a lot of work that we already do, which will save time and ultimately make it profitable to, again, pass some of these cost savings on to your clients, or to, you know, increase staff salaries or even your own take home pay. So there, you know, I think this one's sticky. I might
Yeah.
be wrong, but I think this is one to keep a very close eye on.
It's more, I think, to come on regulations when they come, how much they shut this down and stuff. Because as it is right now, it's the more integrated it comes in our like our phone and more usable it is. It's the way you ask questions always becomes really important. But like the kids will come up ready to go with this. Harder for us because it's new, but a new generation is going to come and be second nature, really take this next level. I think
Yeah.
the thing that's going to happen is there are going to be people in society who have ChatGPT 25, while the rest of society had ChatGPT 5, 6, and 7, and that's a difference in disparity in power with regard to the AI, whatever we want to call it, that they have is going to create a segregation of society. Just like if someone was a billionaire is on a different level than someone who's like regular income. If you have a GPT that's like super smart or something like that, governments have or something like that. Like imagine if China has or let's put a non-thing, say Mongolia has like a ChatGPT 50 and Russia has ChatGPT 20, it puts them at a very powerful position to be able to compete with them. So it's going to change, I think, strategically. Everything's going to change with this.
I think fundamentally the way we get information and obtain information is going to change.
Yeah.
Like search as we know it now, like Googling things, will be way different in a couple years.
Who would have thought, like, you thought you had a huge moat and like it's nothing, then overnight it's like, okay, last December, let's throw that game plan out. It's like it's a completely different. And Google has Bard, and they are creating some creative ways they stay in the game, and so they're smart about it. But it's a wild thing. We'll be talking about this for a long time, especially how it plays in the immigration field. I've been toying on how to use an immigration space other than for marketing, writing, and stuff like that. And to get it to maybe analyze cases and do synopsis faster. And
I mean, that stuff is coming. I don't know if it's ability to analyze cases. I mean, I think the role of the lawyer will remain static for a little while, but when it's like collect all your client information, your GPT is writing your petitioner's letter of support instead of your assistant, or it's doing the first draft for your assistant rather than a human doing it. And that's where like the initial time savings are going to come into play. Yeah. Ultimately, I think there are some like very significant legal fields that are going to be dramatically impacted by GPT, like contract writing agreements, those kinds of simple types of things, like incorporation types of stuff. And we're going to have to adapt. But any sort of like white collar service-based business that doesn't require a hands-on aspect to it will be affected.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you all for coming to the show. Like spectacular information for people watching. It's a game changer in their practice. So,
man, I always love hanging out with you, brother. It's good to talk to you.
I appreciate it. I have a new series of videos I'm going to start, interviews called the Founder Series, to talk about people who found their own law firm and grown it. And I asked ChatGPT, I'm like, give me 20 good questions to ask. So it's interesting. I always ask ChatGPT 3.5 and also 4 because they're slightly different. And sometimes 3.5 is better, even though it's a lower version. And then I compare those. It's interesting how that works out. But I have some questions, and I'll have like 20 people I'm going to contact and see who come on the show and talk about it. And I'm sure you're going to be coming on. So I'll give you the question ahead of time and something for.
No, actually, I don't want them ahead of time. I'm just going to have my GPT answer them in real time for your question.
We can do that too.
Nah, John, anytime, seriously, I'm always happy to come back on the show, and thank you as always. And I will say this, if anybody is listening and they want to talk more about this NIW thing and what happened, my contact information is available, and I really do believe that this is something that we should share widely, because it looks like it's going to be a small window. Fingers crossed for the next election, but it might just be a small window, and we can actually take advantage of it.
Well, I have to say, John, I don't know, running such a big operation and many hours, work as many hours as you do. I don't know how you have time to be so kind with your time. And I've sent people your way, colleagues to ask questions. You're always kind of, I'm like, how do you have the time to do all this? And I thought I make a lot of time, but I just can't do it. But God bless you for what you do and be so kind.
Look, I mean, honestly, John, at the end of the day, nothing we do is proprietary. And one of the amazing things about the immigration bar is that we're really all in this together. We really are. Yeah. So, I think we have to make a little bit of time, but if if you do have questions, reach out. If I can't get to you right away, we'll set a time to talk.
Good stuff, man. I appreciate it, John. Good seeing you.
All right, man. Take care.
Have you ever felt that the road to establishing a successful immigration law firm is riddled with unexpected obstacles and setbacks? I've been there, and I'm here to tell you, you are not alone. Picture this. My wife, then girlfriend, and I had just landed for a vacation, only to be greeted by a voicemail that changed everything. In an instant, once the plane landed, she lost her job. The very one job that was supposed to support us while I launched my own solo immigration law firm. Suddenly, our financial cushion vanished, and I was thrust into the high-stakes world of entrepreneurship with no safety net. Despite a slow start and a discouraging lack of leads and referrals, I remained determined to build a law firm that provided a 5-star client experience. After countless hours spent researching, watching, and implementing marketing strategies with mixed results, I eventually began to see my firm's revenues not only surpass my previous revenue and salary as an associate, but double it. Today, I run a successful law firm with a team of associates and support staff, and I'm the proud founder of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine, podcasts, courses, workshops, and more. But my journey wasn't easy. I made many mistakes, wasted time and money, and wished I had a mentor to guide me through the challenges. Although I was fortunate enough to find a few peers who offered support, I couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be a better way. That's why I decided to be the change I'd wish I'd seen. This month, I'm thrilled to announce the launch of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox private mentorship and peer group. This exclusive group is designed to bring solo and small firm practitioners in a monthly, private, and intimate setting to openly discuss business strategies, share successes, even exchange invaluable tactics that they wouldn't share anywhere else. By joining this premium group, you'll not only benefit from my hard-earned expertise, but also forging long-lasting relationships with like-minded professionals who are committed to elevating their practices. Space is limited for this game-changing opportunity. If you're ready to make a real, lasting impact on your business, simply email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Again, that's info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. And I'll send you all the information you need to get started. Don't miss this chance to transform your immigration law firm and reach new heights of success.